It's nice to know we have the guy that presses the right buttons.
It always sound better if there's no video or audio.
All right, so we'll call this meeting to order at 6:35, and we'll start with the pledge.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All righty. I haven't heard from Mr. Cardone yet. Jim emailed me and John emailed me that they weren't going to attend today. I have to say, I think on Jim, even with asking for excused absences, we're racking up quite a bit. So we're going to have to look at that. But that would take care of it. On minutes, has everybody read the minutes? They are very extensive.
I have not.
Very. You didn't have time to read 45 pages of minutes?
45 two times. I think
Yeah,
there's two
I only opened one.
two that are out there. And
Which,
we still have outstanding minutes from the ones that,
that John worked on, that we have to bring up next time John's here. I wanted to talk about minutes real quick, though, and I spoke to Mr. Harrington earlier today. I'm a little concerned that if we are spending the time, or our recording secretary spending the time to type very detailed minutes, I'm afraid we may go over budget this year. John,
We're almost done, right?
we have 3 more minutes, we have
Two
3 to
meetings.
4 meetings, depending on what we have. So I wanted to bring it to the board. John had been in discussion on minutes before I had asked him, and for a right to know, we have to record who's here, who made a motion, what the motion was, who seconded it, and what the vote was. And I think there could be a happy medium between that and 45 pages of,
Yeah, I think if you have what you just said with a general sense of the discussion, that's typically what minutes for municipal boards entail, not verbatim.
I was just thinking between that and the YouTube, in the video that we're posting, that is verbatim. But I wanted to get the sense of the board before I just made a unilateral decision.
Well, for the record, the video does not count as minutes. I had asked that question previously, and unfortunately.
It doesn't, yeah.
So it doesn't count for any, I agree, it's verbatim. I mean, if you want to know what happened.
I'm just thinking
that's-
it's there to fill in if we don't need to type discussion, was my thought. So I don't know if we're really looking, I'm not really looking for a motion. I just wanted to see if everybody else was in agreement with that.
what do other boards, like planning board, zoning board, those kinds of things? Because, this seems to me, instead of minutes, to be a transcript.
Yes,
And I don't know that we're required to publish a transcript.
Not at all.
we're not. She also is a recording secretary for the Board of Selectmen, and they have much more detailed minutes. I can't speak for the planning board in this town. Do you know if they just do?
They do.
A full transcript?
We have much more detailed minutes, but I would say that, for the same length of meeting, we're likely to have 6 or 7 pages of minutes, maybe 8 tops, but.
Mr. Chairman?
Kevin?
So the long minutes, though, was a Saturday work session, right? So I'm pretty sure, and so that went,
That was one of the long ones, but we had, what was, the other one was a Thursday, Tuesday night when we met with the town.
how long
And
was that? I wasn't here for that.
30-something pages, and it wasn't that long.
They've
2.5 hours.
been
or so.
produced as a transcript, more or
Yes.
less.
So-
Which is a little more than necessary.
So what I would say is perhaps we table the topic till our next meeting, allow people to read New Hampshire RSA 91A, because that's
Well-
where the minutes regulations are. People could familiarize themselves with what the legal requirement is, and then maybe we could come back at it.
I was actually going to say, John can speak to, the town administrator can speak to the legal requirement, because he and I just had this conversation.
What you had just told the board is what the statute says. Who's there, the attendance, the date, the motions, who makes the motions, and a general description of what the discussion is. It does not say verbatim.
Zach?
The school board minutes also follow that same format. A 3-hour meeting will be compressed into typically 6 or 7 or 8 pages. Something that you can pull as a reference, but most certainly process in a much faster.
The other advantage is I think then we will be reading and voting on these minutes a lot faster and get them posted. Andy?
Yeah, I would suggest that the board authorize the chair to speak with our recording secretary. She does, it's the same person that does minutes for other boards, and I think you could certainly steer her towards the format she uses for the Board of Selectmen, for example.
Zach?
Second it.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Okay. Citizens' comments. Seeing none, we'll move down to item 5, further discussion of the school budget. Do you want to start, Zach? Do you have an overview?
Yeah, so, does everybody receive the updated packet that I passed out? And if there's anybody in the audience that would like an updated package, I do have a few more left. Basically, I can just run down the notes that we have here, and a couple of other housekeeping things, so we'll cover that as well. The SAU staff is on vacation until January 2nd, which is the date of our next meeting, so as an FYI to the committee, any changes that we make, or potential changes we make today or requests for additional information, more than likely will not be available for that meeting on the 2nd, because the staff will be unavailable until the 2nd. So just giving an update right now. We have, in the packet you just received, you have a new table of contents. They added, in addition to number 7, which is expanded enrollment history, which is document 50A. There's slight changes to the budget due to following modifications. Page 2A, the high school tuition line has been updated. We received new figures as well as updated the verbiage to account for actual budgeted students, and that bolded, she has bolded that line. It is line 30. I don't know if, does everybody want to look at these as I'm rattling down the list, or do you want me just to rattle through the list? What's, how would the board like to see everything?
I was going to follow along with you.
Okay, so I can roll down.
No.
Page 3A has been modified to add a line in the addition of 1,000 for the art requested by the NBC. New figure being 13K. That has been highlighted in red. It is line 58. Page 12A, the bottom line changed due to the changes that occurred on page 2A. High school tuition in page 3A, the art supplies have also updated the page tuition line, which is line 394. So that agrees with the high school tuition in Appendix A, which is page 13-1.
Could you do that one a little more slowly?
Yes,
I lost
certainly.
what line we were on. We were on page what?
Page 12A.
12A, I got it.
The bottom line changed due to the changes that were made last
Oh,
week.
okay.
Yep. The changes were the change on 2A and the change on 3A, as well as the PACE tuition line, which is line 394. And that all now coincides with pages, the information in Appendix A, page 13-1. On page 13-1, the high school tuition Appendix A has been updated to reflect the changes we spoke about at the last NBC meeting, as well as some recent additional changes in enrollment. Pages 31A through 34A, the default budget changed when we made changes to the budget. Page 49A, this is the estimated revenue sheet that has been added, so it shows as far back as Ms. Wheeler could pull per the request of Mr. Verville. The spreadsheet compares estimations arrived at during budget session and the estimated estimations during tax rate session, which is in the fall. And then page 50A has been added to show additional years on the graph as requested by the NBC. And that is what I have that is in that packet that was just passed out.
Thank you, Zach. Do you have any further updates from the school board, or et cetera, before we get into this?
We met last night, discussed a number of things. Moving forward, we spent some time last night working on starting to work on the facilities improvement plan. We'll be working on that throughout the next couple of meetings, trying to develop that. We're looking at the data that has come back from the engineering study, and we're going to start producing a document breaking out basically repairs and updates that are needed inside the school. We're going to try to produce that so that we're looking at about a 10-year span on making those repairs and those improvements. We are early in that process. That will have a budgetary impact down the road. It's nothing that is in particularly in this particular budget. It may, we may decide to discuss it through warrant articles as far as funding future parts of that plan or initial parts of that plan, which was the biggest point of discussion yesterday. Budgetarily, that's about all we had last night that will be coming down that would affect this.
And who's here to speak tonight, so we
So,
know where we're going?
we have Mr. Smith, principal, and then we have Deb Bover, the technology coordinator. Jim Deely, the chairman, is here, and that is what we have tonight.
Okay. So, I guess we can hop right into it.
Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. West is here as well, I apologize.
And he is,
Phys ed teacher.
thank you. We had a few requests from last meeting. I think most of the budget requests were set. If anybody has a place they want to start on the school budget?
There was,
Yep,
Chairman,
yep.
there was one other document that someone requested be updated, I believe Kevin may have, and that was the school enrollment coming forward, you know, like, we only have 2 years, we have last year and we have this year, and I believe he said, you know, could we have the previous year so you can see how the number
Yeah.
of students flows? So I see that that's not part of the packet. I do understand, you know, everything is busy this time of year, so, you know, they did quite a number of things, but I think we are still missing.
That was a
That
class
piece.
size on page 51. I don't know how I know that, but we discussed it quite a bit. I thought that was I understood this graph fine.
Oh, well, I think people, well, I don't know. I understood the graph fine. I just thought that some people wanted another year's worth of information to see how it went. And I believe the second question was, we see that we are targeting much lower number of students than perhaps the state requests or other school districts, maybe even in our SAU. And I believe there was a request that said, well, why are we doing 14, 16, you know, whatever, as we go through? And I believe the answer we got was, that's what we inherited, and, you know, we wanted some further thought on that. In other words, do we need to stay with those numbers, or can we let it go up a little bit more?
Well, I think those are the school board numbers.
Right, and they did say those were ones that everybody in the room agreed, well, they existed before we got here. So I don't know that they've been revisited to say, are they the good numbers?
Kevin?
So the discussion around page 51 was not a lack of understanding question. There seemed to be some question as to the current number of students, 17, 18, today versus what was predicted last year versus what was present last year. So the request was to bring a copy of last year's sheet like this to this meeting to compare what was projected, what reality was, how the numbers moved around to try to get some tracking. That was the request for page 51. The other, and that apparently is not here, and that,
If you want to speak to it, yeah, the only, move on over so we can record you.
So I spent days chasing those numbers, and what had happened was, we knew that at least one student was moving, so those numbers are right, but we knew somebody was moving, and we thought that somebody else would. And so, these ones all have names, so I can get a copy without names. I just still was working on it today. We had, let's see, sorry. We ended the year with 60 because we had 2 go out in the summer, 1 never came, so that it was the number was there, and 2 others left after, and then we had a bunch move in, so that they got replaced with new people.
Which grade are you on? Which grade are we on?
So this is second to third grade.
Okay.
Third grade, you're right.
So our current year's third grade class.
That's correct, right.
Okay.
Okay,
was
that's
a-
moving up to fourth
That would be
grade.
next year's
That's right.
fourth grade
Right.
class. Correct.
And so, and you had, so those are, even though the numbers are similar, we had projected they would be lower because we knew people were leaving. We didn't anticipate they'd be replaced, but they were, and then overtaken by more. And I did some research on class size, and in that research, it seems that third grade, because you had suggested combining third and fourth grade, which I did think about a lot, with competency-based education, it might even make sense. But it seems that third grade maturationally is a cutoff, that there's a pretty decent gap. That's what my research showed. And that K to 3 is a better band. And so I wouldn't advocate for combining third and fourth. And with regard to class size, it seems that there is a point of diminishing returns, but 20, above 20, the research indicates to me that 20 and below does better, like markedly better than greater than 20 in a class. And so I would still advocate for another fourth grade teacher for those reasons.
Because if we don't, we have 3 per, then we're at, what, 22?
Yeah, and if I can add a little bit more information to that. So, last year, the board was looking at data, testing results and whatnot, and we spent a lot of time trying to figure out how to put an increased effort in certain subject areas. So that what is currently the third grade class, what was the second grade class, was running, they did have 4, it was a 4 classroom grade level last year. We, last year, looked at trying to find a way to put another math specialist inside the building to help divide that work up, because at that time, our one math specialist was doing an awful lot of work. And we wanted the math department to be able to divide their efforts and focus more on that. So we took a classroom teacher and who had done work as a math specialist at times, and turned her into a math specialist. And we'd like to continue having that math specialist inside the building, and having her working as a math teacher. But to do that, we really found we weren't expecting, when we made the change, we were figuring we were gonna be a 20 student classroom size. We weren't expecting 7 or 8 or 9 students to come in. So we saw a net gain of, I think you said 8 students, Chris?
It was, so not a net gain of 8, because we had some that left and then some that came. So we had 1, 2, 3, 4, 6. We had 8 move in. We had 1 that never showed up, and 4 that left. So it's a net gain of 3.
Okay. So again, those class sizes, and they are going up, and we're projecting next year to be at that 68 student number. So again, that starts to really we're basically 23 kids a classroom. That is a lot in that grade level. And so we really want to get that class size back down in line with what we think is appropriate.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Kevin?
So, to back up a little bit, the request was for a copy of this sheet from last year.
So that sheet is accurate. My confusion was because, yeah.
The request, just to be very specific about what's being asked for, this sheet is titled 2018, 2019. The request was for this sheet 17, 18.
Okay, because she had it last week. That's why I didn't.
But the rest of us didn't. So that's why it was asked for, so the rest of the committee could take a look at it and just see what those changes are, instead of talking through it, because I get talking through it.
Oh, right.
The problem is when I walk away and I want to digest it a little bit, I don't have anything as a reference point. So that's why the document was requested.
So you want 2017, 18.
Yes, last year's sheet that was presented to the MBC, that's like this, if that's possible. So, Mr. Chairman, if I may,
Yeah.
so the 4th grade, well, so from my mind eye, other than anecdotally, the school board recommended number really is just some district desire from years past. But the state guidance is 25 for fourth grade, with a max at 30. And that's also true for the third grade, and it's also true for the fifth grade. So 3, 4, and 5, the state recommendation is 25 students to a class, max 30. So if we use the state recommendation as the nominal, and the state max is the upper limit, the upper spec limit, to put it in sort of an industrial perspective, then the lower spec limit would be 20. And so we would be in that lower half of the spec limit, so to speak, with 3 teachers. Is that, based on current numbers, is that accurate?
I believe yes.
Just so we could speed, I know where this discussion's going, and what I'm going to ask is, rather than discuss school policy, we're doing budget. I'll entertain a motion, if the motion is to remove the teacher line, because that's basically what we're discussing. If somebody wants to make that motion, we can vote on that motion.
But I'm not there yet. I don't have the background information to be able to make that motion. So if I could continue my questioning and get some background information, it would let me know whether or not that motion would be well-advised or ill-advised.
And Mr. Chairman, I just.
Troy?
I make a motion to remove the line for the teacher, for the extra teacher.
Do we have a second? If we don't have a second on the motion dies. There's no motion.
Mr. Chairman?
However, I would say, again, that's what we have to do here. I understand we have to get back up, but rather than, we are here for the budget, so that is the, Kevin's got the floor, I can get you in a second, if you want to.
Yeah, so I just want some clarification, because I'm confused at what I'm hearing. So I just want to make sure that I understand what I'm being told. So, we added a math specialist last year.
Correct.
That math specialist works as a teacher classroom currently, or no?
That math specialist works in all the grade, well, the one we added really works in the lower grade levels.
Correct.
Up K through 4?
And
5?
maybe 5, yeah.
K through 5.
So this person visits classroom to classroom or grade to grade and is a supplemental resource into the classroom?
Yes.
So I'm trying to understand. So you're telling me that the group that I see here currently identified as the third grade, when it was the second grade, was 4 classrooms large,
Correct.
Yes.
and we dropped a teacher last year,
We
but created a math specialist.
took a classroom teacher to create a math specialist from that grade level.
And now we've decided that that's a mistake.
We did not anticipate the amount of growth in that grade level that we saw.
Was it a mistake?
No, we can't control who moves into town,
No,
so when we,
no, I think Kevin asked the question, excuse me, Mr. Chairman. but-
Please, I'll yield the floor.
Yeah, I didn't like the connotation that the school department and the administrators made a mistake by hiring the math specialist.
No, the question is, was dropping a classroom teacher,
Oh, okay.
for whatever reason, right, to go from whatever the number of teachers, classroom teachers was, to N-1. Because now we're talking about 1 year later, we want to add that back in. That's what this budget represents. So the question was the dropping of a teacher last year, in hindsight, I mean, we all make mistakes, whatever, is that perceived to be a mistake that needs to be corrected? That's the question.
I feel that the additional math specialist inside the building, I think, is an asset. I think it will take more than 1 year to see results from repositioning that teacher. So do I think it was a mistake? Absolutely not. I think it will take more than a year to see results. I think if that class size was projected to stay the same, we would be very comfortable being 20 students per class and having a 3-person class. And I'm not speaking for the board, I mean, I'm speaking for my opinions as a how I feel from the board. But 20 students per class is a higher than comfortable but acceptable number. But when we start approaching 23, that is a lot of kids in a class, and we were not anticipating that kind of growth at that grade level.
I would also interject that we've heard from the building inspector that we have a lot of new houses going in here.
It's
The
only
real
gonna get
estate
bigger.
market is really hot in town again.
Yep.
We have people moving into town, into developments that tend to be family-friendly developments.
And we will see, when the demographic study comes back, we will hopefully see some more data that will show us if that's what we believe to be a short-term trend or a long-term trend. But it would appear at face value that Deerfield is growing at a pace a little more rapid than many of our surrounding communities.
Andrew?
Yes, I just wanted to ask about, I had mentioned 3-4 as a possibility of a combined grade, simply because that's where my son had one. But when I look at this schedule, I say, 4-5 would be much more compatible. You could do 4-5 with 6 teachers and only have 19 in a class. Right now, your fifth grade, looking forward to next year, is projected to only have 16, less than 17 students per class. So, it's very unfortunate that the class years are so uneven, but I don't know that every year you can address.
It would be a lot easier if we knew we were going to have 60 students every year
Oh,
for
absolutely.
9 years.
But we have
But-
bubble classes moving through
And,
here.
and
Right.
and that always poses a challenge, and you adjust that by sliding teachers into new grade levels every year and chasing the bubbles around. But
But fifth grade with 16.7,
The only thing I'd say is I went to elementary school with combined classes because the fifth grade was 4 kids and the sixth grade was 5 kids, and worked that way through at a total elementary school of 50 kids. I don't know if it would be possible to just pull one class out of here and put them together.
it's a huge paradigm shift as well,
Yeah.
and it's not something that could be instituted over the course of 6 months. There's a significant amount of planning, and I don't know that the school board is interested in entertaining that.
Troy?
All right, so
Troy.
it's Troy.
I'm sorry, Troy.
Mr. Dill, I
thought I
know
did
that
well
this
the
is
other
a
day.
valuable and important discussion, but I noticed that Ms. Bovier and Mr. Ruest are both here. I believe they probably have, which is not as less significant than what we're doing, but I believe they probably have other things they need to do this evening. Could we defer this for a moment, since it seems to continue, and allow them to speak to the questions that we have specifically for them tonight in technology and PE?
I was going to give this a few more minutes and see if we made productive motion, which I think we are.
I'd also like to have, can I add discussion here? Please keep in mind too, just because you went to school doesn't mean that you're an expert in education. If you're not a professional educator at this time, you do not understand how schools run. They operate in a very different way than business, and just because we went to school doesn't make us school experts. I would also like to say that we spend a lot of time discussing, these teachers, there's only 17, there's 17 kids, there's 19 kids, there's 20. We have 33 aides in our school for 8 grade levels, because K and pre-K have teachers' aides and help. So we're talking 1 to 8, 33 people help out in the school. Some of those are dedicated. Absolutely, but it still means there's another adult in the classroom working with a specific friend. So you're looking at least 1 to 2 to 4 adults in every classroom. Even with 23 children, you could have 4 adults in that classroom. That teacher is not alone managing those friends.
So, Mr. Chairman, if I may, because I'm going to assume that Ms. Hopkins' request was in the form of the motion, and I will second that because clearly there's a lot of ground to cover here. I think we should move on to technology and then perhaps come back to this a little later so that we can, because she brings up some very valuable points that should be sussed out. So I would suggest we table this discussion, allow other people to present what they have to present, and then come back to it.
All those in favor, say aye.
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 Okay. We'll move to technology. What,
Could I say something?
Mr. Smith?
Mr. West came, I was asked if there were things that we wanted to put back in and we thought were important. He came to talk specifically to what his was. So it is a technology thing, but it was more in line with that
With
point
the
that
teacher,
was made.
yeah, teacher request.
Okay.
Hi, everyone. I'm here because earlier this year, we approached Mr. Smith about trying to obtain some heart rate monitors for our physical education program. And I had written up kind of a brief description for him. I don't know if you've had a chance to kind of see that proposal and the equipment that we were looking to purchase. He had asked, because this particular meeting was coming up tonight, that I try to give him a little bit more information. I didn't have a chance to do that because the last few weeks at school have been pretty busy, pretty hectic, both in and out of the classroom. So I offered to come tonight just to kind of have a conversation with you. I try to put myself a little bit in your shoes, thinking about the expenses that you're responsible for. And wanted to get you to understand that the request for heart rate monitors wouldn't necessarily be just to be used in a health-related unit, let's say. So we wouldn't be spending a bunch of money to use this piece of equipment or these pieces of equipment for just a few weeks out of the year. It's something that we see we would envision using on a regular basis. It would help us track very specific data on our students. We feel like it would be a very concrete and motivational tool for us to use to help them understand how to create and maintain a wellness protocol for themselves, both now and as they get older. And it's important for me to let all of you know that I have been teaching for a while, and I wouldn't come to you asking for technology toys. These are definitely tools that we think would benefit our students. So I guess those are the things that I wanted to share with all of you. I don't know if you had a chance to see the information I gave. Okay. So should I pass out what I have to them, or do you have questions for me? Or I kind of don't know what you do or don't know.
This is a little bit of an odd one, you know, we didn't get
Yeah.
that request. Do we have any questions on the program? I know there,
Yeah, I get the 40,000-foot view. So how do you integrate that? How often do you integrate that? And really, what are the educational learnings, you know, a little more specifically that one would expect to get from that?
Yeah, it's a great question. So the units that we're hoping to purchase are wrist-based units. Miss Yell and I, the other physical education teacher, got to go to a national conference early last year in Boston. Polar heart rate monitors put on a presentation, and the wrist units would allow us to very easily maintain and share those devices with students from class to class to class. It would be easy for students to come in, find their heart rate monitor that they're assigned to, put it on, and use it during whatever activities we're doing in physical education class. The other thing that's fairly unique about this type of device is that we can have, I think, up to 40 of them at a time streaming to an iPad device. And last year I purchased a rear projection screen. It's a huge screen that I set up on the gym on the stage in the gym. And we could actually have their heart rate monitors both on the wrist unit themselves. So if we were outside doing an outdoor activity, they could still kind of track their progress in terms of their cardiovascular output. And then if we were inside, I could actually project their progress onto a huge screen. And the Polar software that is designed for schools actually kind of creates almost like a game-like environment. So as the teachers can go in and kind of set individual goals for each of the students in terms of their cardiovascular heart rate. And as students are meeting those different goals, they kind of get little I don't know, badges or something like that. So there can be a little bit of a motivational piece. The information is tracked whenever the students use them. We would be requesting not enough units for every student to use a device every time, but we could easily rotate so that once a week every student would be able to use them. And when I say every student, I'm talking about intermediate and middle school students. So our K1, 2 kids, this probably would be beyond what they would be looking to do. But our 3rd grade, 4th through 8th grade, this would be a pretty useful tool for us to be able to teach them about physical activity and wellness, and them to be able to understand how their body works and functions, and some of the information that they need to be able to understand how to lead a healthy lifestyle as they get older.
Zach, Zach had a comment right off.
Just as a point of, or as a reference, that line was line 70 in the budget,
On page 3.
on page 3A, well, currently 3A.
Oh, 3A, yeah.
Yeah. So, that was line 70, just as a reference for anybody that's trying to follow along.
Okay.
Follow up, Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
Heart rate only?
So these units are heart rate units only.
And the cost per unit?
These are listed at $179 a unit.
Is there, to follow up on Kevin's subscription fees or anything else on these? An ongoing contract that we pay after we bought them?
So not necessarily in the units, the only ongoing cost would be a subscription to the online software that would allow us to track individual students and allow parents to have online access to their children's data.
If you're done, Andrea had a,
Well, I guess anytime you start tracking health data of children, I get a little bit concerned about privacy issues. You know, maybe Sally doesn't want everybody to know that she has trouble doing this. So is there a way that it's not identified? Like when you project this on the screen, is it like students 1 through 40 and I know I'm number 25, but it doesn't say my name?
So I can set it up in a number of different ways. I could even take that particular student and not have their data showing on the screen. It would just be on their personal monitor. The screen is just an option that we could use, but one of the features to this particular device is that it has an LCD screen that each individual student could wear, and then once the student takes the device off and we plug it in and sync the data, we can still have all of that information, but not necessarily share it with everyone else.
Thank you.
further questions?
Well, so, if I may, thank you for coming in. I appreciate the defense of the concept, because we don't get a lot of that, and so it certainly helps. I have to confess, I lean against it, and the reason I lean against it is because I'm an old fart, and it's fairly easy and fairly accurate to obtain a pulse rate. It's probably a good thing for kids to learn how to do, just in case, God forbid, they ever need to detect a pulse. And for, I'm all about integrated ed. I like that concept. I think there might be more benefit of having kids do their own data entry, graphing, et cetera, linked to other parts of the curriculum. So being a little bit old-fashioned, I kind of lean against this sort of question. The other thing that gives me cause for pause is, these are kids and they're tough. They break things, and I always get nervous about electronics in a very kinetic environment, especially outside. It is the Granite State after all, and we do have some concerns about the durability and longevity of the units. Sight unseen, right? I've never seen one of the ones you're referring to. So I have to admit, it makes me, it does make me a little nervous, and for that reason, I got to admit, I'm not thrilled. But I do thank you for coming out and laying that out for us.
Gonna have to act, oh,
I make a motion to remove the heart monitors from the budget.
they're not in the budget.
They're not in, it would be if we went the
Unless-
other
I mean,
direction.
Can we move on? Then why are we having this discussion? Because I appreciate your pontification, but if it's not in there, it's done and done.
The reason we're having the discussion is we asked the principal to bring in teachers if they had to plead the case on it.
I thought that this friend was here because we asked him to attend.
Mr. Chairman.
Kevin?
So it's my recollection that the request that was made during our last meeting was to get,
You wanted information on the,
I wanted a copy of not what's in the budget, but the things that were requested or thought of that didn't make it to this point, that we lost on the cutting room floor. In fact, I was rather specific in the request, hoping that we would get it, sometime well before this meeting, so that members would have a chance to review it, digest it, and then potentially be in a position to make motions. So that being said, sometimes the things we choose not to do are as telling of our priorities as the things that we choose to do. And so, based on that, I am more than willing to abandon this line of questioning and put out, I don't even know if I want to put out a repeat request for the list of types of materials, because our time now is dwindling. We have 2 meetings left, so if we get it for the next meeting, we can ask questions. If we're lucky, we get all our answers for Saturday, that we could vote it in. It was requested, strongly requested. It wasn't the first year we've requested it. To me, this goes sort of to what we had around what is currently line 50 in our budget about putting in supplies, so we didn't have to send lists home. We fully funded it. The board and the district chose not to spend it. To me, this almost is feeling like that argument all over again. So I'm willing to walk away from it if there's no
well,
interest.
I was gonna ask if there is a motion to put this back in, and I haven't seen a motion. Thank you very much for coming in and defending it.
You're welcome.
We
Thanks for
feel like we
listening to
learned
me.
about it? Oh, Ben,
I'll make a motion to reinstate it.
we have a motion to reinstate. Do we have a second?
I'll second it for discussion.
Okay, now we're discussing. Do you want to speak to your motion, Ben?
I mean, I like his explanation. I think it makes a lot of sense. I think understanding more about how physical ed is affecting you and how you can achieve the goals you need to get. I mean, I know there's a lot of kids who have issues and are constantly concerned about their own physical activity levels. And I think it would be a cool way, it almost sounds like kind of gamifying the system, to use that term. That sounds like a great way for the kids to learn and get excited about it and have a new and fresh way to look at it. So I'm all for it.
For further discussion on the motion,
Point of clarification, what's the dollar amount that's associated with the motion?
Minus 900.
so
Yeah.
49.
So, yeah.
$4,900 is what we removed from that line.
I would say
So the motion's not to exceed? Oh, no, it would be 49.
49. So I would say it's a really interesting concept. I voted to put money back in the art budget, but I would say I don't support this one. I don't think it goes to enough students. Zach?
The board did spend some time talking about that, and obviously, when we're looking at the budget, we're looking at ways to rein in costs. That was an item that the board did opt to rein in and remove.
Andy?
Yeah, I think it's a wonderful idea. I'm going to vote against it on the basis of the fact that the school board is not recommending it. It's their budget. They've thought about it. They've wrestled with Mr. West about this, or the administration has. Somebody has, and I think that's probably a good stance for the budget committee to take, rather than try to second guess the school board and the administration.
Further discussion. Seeing none, all those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye. I'm sorry. I don't say aye.
Raise your hands for aye.
Aye.
We have 2. Those opposed, motion fails. Thank you, Ben, for making a motion. Thanks for coming in.
Yeah, thank you.
I think we're going to switch to technology.
Well, I think you might still be on technology, just,
We're kind of on technology. Is there a specific line we're going to be talking about?
well, quite frankly, I was asked to come in to talk about any technology line that you asked about.
Okay.
But I do have a specific technology line that I would like to talk about.
Well, kind of when we started with everybody, I've asked for just an overview of what's going on so we can get on the technology page and go from there.
Okay.
Do you have just overview of how, what the school's doing, new, changing, et cetera?
So not about specific lines.
Just give us a quick overview.
I can't give you an overview without just giving a shout out to Mark, because he actually presented at a technology conference. He uses his own rear screen, his own iPad, and his own projector that he provides to the school. And he was filmed as a presenter at the Krista McAuliffe Technology Conference and is now streaming on Manchester Public Television. So if you want to see the presentation that he did, it is stuff that is totally amazing. Blew my mind about what could be done in phys ed, and probably uses computers for kids to take quizzes and get immediate feedback multiple times a quarter. So I think it's something that we have a real strength in. So that's one piece of the overview.
Mr. Chairman, could we get you to send us, email the link to that?
Yes,
Ms. Bovair,
I would be
please?
happy to.
Thank you.
And he did present that to the staff too. And I realized that, like, when he teaches kids to throw a ball, he throws a ball in a video. He has the kids video themselves and compare the two videos and see what they're doing different. If anybody had taught me to throw a ball like that, I might be able to throw a ball today. I totally can. I was never coached. He does it all with video, and it's totally amazing. Yeah, go watch that video.
Thank you. Good night. Thank you.
And we've also had heart rate monitors in the past that have not been damaged, and actually we can't use them anymore because the connectors no longer connect to the contemporary computer. So it's not a new thing that he's asking for. But to give you, the huge overview on technology is that there's major changes in the kind of technology and the way we pay for technology. And it's kind of an unfortunate thing, but if you notice the software line, and excuse me, but I have the lines all referenced from the original. This is what I got this week to work from, so I didn't have your new
Zach's pretty good at it, so.
budget. Okay, so if you look at line 44 in the old version, and that line totally is up, I think, about $6,500. You there? That's electronic licensing. If you look at the line that is regular software, regular education software, which is, on mine is 83, line 83.
That one's not going to match up.
That one's
Oh, no, it does.
down
Yep.
like $7,000 plus. This is the trend in the business right now. It used to be that I tried to add a new piece of software, major piece of software, every year. I would sometimes do it over a couple of years. One piece of software might cost $7,000 to implement for the whole school. Piece of math software, piece of reading software. All of those software alternatives have been discontinued because the way the software business operates now, it's all by subscription. So we can't spread our investment over a couple of years. We have to, and kind of alternate which subject we're updating different years, like you would buy a textbook series. You have to pay a fee every year. And you see this in home business. Microsoft is now going to a subscription service. Adobe has a subscription service. So unfortunately, that means that it's getting more expensive to rent the software instead of buy. I would much prefer to buy, but it's not an option. So that's an overview explanation of why those two lines have kind of flip-flopped.
The advantage to subscription is we're staying up to date and current with everything, though, rather than buying and having going out of date, correct?
Right. And what they have done to I guess, incentivize it is they discontinue support. So we've been running math software and reading software. One is called Fast Math, another one's called Read Naturally, that are really fundamental to our instruction. We've been running them for probably 4 years since they stopped support for them, and kind of patching it together. So you can imagine when you go from Windows 2000 to Windows XP, and advance different levels in computers, and the software was designed for a previous version, at some point it just doesn't work. So we've limped those along for a while. We actually kept XP machines for quite a long time just to run those pieces of software, but we've come to the end of the road on that. We can't do it anymore. And unfortunately, it is an area that I think will continue to grow, that will continue to be billed in that way from business. And, you know, we need to be careful about what we choose. Every salesperson I talk to says, oh, but it's only $2 per student, or it's only, you know, $3 per student. Well, those add up incredibly once you start layering them on, and you need to make sure that you're getting your money's worth. That electronic software also goes to things like the library circulation software is now an electronic license. The SAU, many of the services we pay for SAU software, server software is a yearly fee. So that's a huge piece of the issue. Another thing, which I tried to kind of total up my lines, because actually, if you look at my lines particularly, they're down significantly, and that's in part because I'm going to be speaking about $15,000 was removed from my budget before I saw this budget, and that's for replacement hardware. So at this point, I think we have $23,000 in the budget for replacement hardware, and that would be line, let's see, it's 100 in the old budget. It's now at $23,000. And it was at $38,000 for last year. That's the line that we replace classroom computers with. It's also the line we replace servers with, that we replace printers with, that we replace switches with, that we replace any piece of background hardware that we use. At the $23,000, we don't have enough to replace. We replace about a fifth of the computers a year. We don't have, in classrooms, we don't have enough money to replace that fifth of computers. This year,
Can I ask?
do you want me to stop?
If you take a quick question, so.
Yeah.
If I understand it right, I just want to make sure I'm getting my head around
Yep.
it. So the plan was replace a fifth a year, so you've got a 5-year life cycle. So if you've got a laptop,
right.
Chromebook, whatever, it's
Right.
a 5-year life cycle and it's out. So we're going to reduce the budget, we're off the 5-year cycle. What does the new cycle look like? What's your estimation of what
What it will become if we
Yes.
don't follow the 5-year cycle?
Yeah,
I'm not
what-
sure.
What will this number give you? Do you know, can you guess?
Oh,
what-
yeah, we're based on $250 per machine.
No, but if with so if the line was fully funded, it would keep us on a 5-year cycle. The line is being reduced.
Right.
Say that was carried forward, what would the new cycle be? Would it be 6 years, 7 years, 8 years, 10 years?
I don't have that data.
Yeah,
This is based on 100 machines at $250 with no money. That would be the replacement of classroom machines and, desktop machines in, say, Mr. Smith's office, my office. That amount would be $25,000. That would not allow for printers or server, any other pieces of technology.
And it looks like you actually spent $40 last year. Were there major breakages or were more things replaced last year to make up?
Yeah, well, last year we replaced the backup system. So we have a different backup system now that the backup system that we had did not back up all of our data. This year, we found that the server that stores all of the data for the school, that's all of the programs and all of the user data, program data. It also stores the, let me see, I've got this written down here. It stores the backup software. It serves the name server and Novell and Zen. We're going to need to replace this current year. That's going to run about $8,000 or $9,000. So in replacing that this year, takes away from the 1/5 replacement cycle. So we're kind of already behind the 8 ball this year in what we have to replace this year. So that would be okay if we had enough money to get kind of back on track next year. But looking from this year to next year, we don't have that money next year either.
You have further questions on that line, or do we want to get back, Zach?
Um,
I would just say that I'm just looking at a $23,000 first budget draft and a $23,000 proposed, so it's not like some of the other ones that have changed that way.
Yeah, no, that line wasn't changed by the board.
Yeah, I mean, I gave it to the administration at a level funding of $38,000, which was what it was funded the previous year.
Okay, I have to look at earlier copies, but the way that we have the first draft listed is it was presented at 23.
Yeah, that, I mean,
I can look into that, but we also do have a reserve fund for technology
Okay.
with about 20,000, just under $20,100 in it. So we have the ability to, if we have larger items that fail, we do have a trust fund set aside with some money in it to help support that if necessary.
and perhaps that's what we could use for the server this year, because the combination of having that need and not having a full replacement cycle for next year means that we're not filling in for both years.
Is that most of the overview of technology? Do we have any other ones?
The
before I
other,
get
the
specific?
other overview would be, honestly, if you look at summer salaries, and that's page,
What number? The
let's
numbers
see.
are matching up well.
Yep. That's line 274, 276, and both of those lines have increased. And one is the summer tech coordinator salary, and that's my salary in the summer. And it's also $5,000 for summer tech support. And the line for me will probably be down next year because I'll be retiring at the end of this year, and you will probably not hire someone at my pay grade. That's based on a teacher's salary, prorated at 20 days for the summer. So that will likely not need to be all expended. The remainder is to pay for a summer technician to come in and help with we tear down every machine, every projector, clean them out, reinstall software, that kind of thing. And the network technician line, 276, is up $9,800, and that was due to a raise in salary of the network technician. He's vital to what we run, particularly with me leaving. It's going to be a kind of patch over year between people. He's made probably twice what he makes with us, working in private industry, and we're lucky to have him at that price. So I wouldn't be honest if I didn't call your attention to those salary lines also.
So, Zach, that is a good question on line 274. I know on the roster update, you guys planned it hiring at a lower step, but could you check that and see if that is the correct amount for the summer, or?
Yeah, that's something I can look into, most certainly.
Thank you for bringing that up.
Yep.
So specific technology questions now that we've got the overview. Do we have any? There's obviously multiple lines here.
Mr. Chairman.
Kevin?
First of all, Ms. Bovee, thank you very much for your years of service. We've been doing this every year for, I don't know, probably 7 or so years. You always come in very well prepared and articulate a very good case for what you do. So I thank you for that. You're very easy to work with, and you'll certainly be missed. I guess my question is, so over the last several years, we've been expanding the program, program in large air quotes. So when I say that, what I mean is, devices in classrooms for every student, right? We've been expanding that for grades and getting that more flushed out. Are we done with that expansion, or are we continuing to fill in where there are perceived gaps?
I think there are going to be some big changes in distribution of computers. What we're finding right now is that, for instance, at the 7th and 8th grade, we have enough computers in the 7th and 8th grade so that 90% of the students can have a device that they're using. The problem is those devices aren't in the places where they need to be using them. So if a classroom, there's one room that is a language arts classroom, that used to be a computer lab, and it got taken down from a computer lab, but it still has, I believe she has 15 computers in there. And that's great in that one classroom. But the kids don't take those 15 computers with them through the day, so that there's other classrooms where maybe there's 4 computers, and they're really short on computers. So what we're finding is that with the same number of computers, we can reach very close to a one-to-one environment in the 7th and 8th grade if we switch over from fixed devices to Chromebook laptops. And that's what Concord School District has done. A lot of school districts have, but I'm particularly thinking of Concord as the school we send to. They have one-on-one devices from 1st grade up through 12th grade. And when our kids go to 9th grade at Concord, they're given a laptop to use for the year. So what we're finding is without an increase in number of machines, we can rearrange the machines we've got so that we can do better coverage. So for instance, when Mr. Ruest was in here, he does a lot of work where he'll sign out like 40, there'll be 2 gym classes together that are meeting together, and there'll be like 40 kids, and he'll sign out 40 computers on carts, and we'll roll them down there. If those kids had computers from their classroom that they just brought to gym class for that day, they would, we wouldn't have to be rolling them around. The kids would be doing the transporting, and they would be available to those kids in any subject that they were using them in. I'm not a fan of doing, like more and more and more and more computer work, like more screen time. But there's some really exciting things that are happening. For instance, the kids who did not perform at the concert this week, or last week, I guess it was, who had a conflict, were able to record themselves on the computer and turn that into the teacher to show that they, had mastered the pieces of music that they would have shown in the concert.
So if I can ask a follow-up for that. So I totally get what you're laying out. So I guess my question is, what is the plan of the district? What is the goal? Is the goal one-on-one, device to student, 1 through 8, or is it something different?
You want my viewpoint? I'm not going to be around,
We have the school board here, and I guess they're the top of the pyramid, so I guess
Okay.
I would ask what their goal or intention is.
Do you want to share?
Sure. All right, so one-on-one has been discussed. It has not been adopted by the school board. The school board has no intention at this point to one-on-one K through 8. We do have a one-on-one initiative that was started a couple of years ago that is in 5th grade through 8th grade. So that is where we are at this point.
So we're there, we have that covered.
We are mostly there. If you
Well,
want to speak to the
we're-
specifics of that.
We're not there in the sense that that program was a hybrid, one-on-one, bring your own device. So what the plan was that the school would provide maybe 60, 70% of the computers needed, and that kids would bring computers from home.
Okay.
And we have looked at, we evaluated this fall how we were doing with that program, and we found out that there was a distribution problem, like the one I mentioned in the 7th and 8th grade, where they're in the wrong places. We have the numbers, but we don't have them in the right places. And there's also somewhat of a problem with kids bringing them in, parents sending them in with kids.
So the plan then, I assume, to correct the distribution issue would fall to the 5-year cycle. Is that the
Yes.
plan to correct that?
So we
over
wouldn't go out and buy a whole bunch of new computers. What we would do is replace, in most cases, we're going to be replacing the computers, the desktops, with these Chromebooks that are inexpensive laptops, which actually take less back-end maintenance because Google does the updating, like Google does the virus protection, does
I
everything.
understand that. So I want to chase back then to to the 1 through 4, K through 4. So there's no policy, there's no, I mean, are you having the discussion? Is that something that's, up for discussion? Is that not up for discussion?
It has not been presented to the board, and it's not in this budget.
Okay, so the reason I asked, just to give some background of why I asked, because one of the questions that I asked for, and I know it's a very difficult bit of work, but I'm hoping that Ms. Wheeler is working on it. And what I had asked for was the technology number through several years, because it's my perception that our technology budget is growing rapidly, that it becomes a larger and larger share of the overall budget each year. But I don't know if that's true. That's a gut that I have. So that's why I asked, if it's possible to tease out technology numbers.
As a percentage of the entire budget?
Well, whatever the dollar spend is, for a few year period, so that we can see, is it growing, is it flat, is it decreasing, is it just sort of swimming around
The
randomly?
the individual line, or do you want to see it as a percentage of the entire budget? Because there are things like we have to have an actual backup, which will create a yearly irregularity. Right.
Yeah,
So-
I don't know, some cogent way to get data that can be presented that shows us what the technology spend is doing over time.
But I think, if I'm following what Jim's saying, though, is, are you looking for,
What
there's a
specifically?
difference between overall technology and,
Back office.
and technology students are using. Because the school itself is using, to run the school, like you're saying, the backup, the
Servers and
servers, et
switches and
cetera.
routers and all sorts of additional hardware.
Okay, so, and that's where it gets difficult, right? Because those servers, those backups, those routers, those switches are used, they're dual purpose, right? They're doing the back office, they're doing the administrative work, they're doing the grades, they're doing SAU, they're doing all that stuff, but they're also, I assume, handling Chromebook traffic, right? There's data traffic from the Chromebook to the cloud and back. So I assume that parts of those network are covering all of that. And that's where it gets a little amorphous. So I guess, yes, what I'm really after is what's the sort of in-classroom technology spend, but I don't want us to carve out network costs because we use network, to run the school, to do the back office, or front office, I guess would be a different way to say it for a school. Because some of that cost is encapsulated in the cost.
Okay, so we're happy to provide you with whatever budget numbers you want, but I don't quite understand exactly what you're after here.
So my question is, and it's difficult to articulate this because there's so many different lines.
Right.
My question is, the technology spend in the Deerfield School District for student, classroom and student use. So what I classify as direct student services, things the students use, things that are used to educate the students, the things that go directly to that. What has that number been doing, say, over the past 5 years?
We will pass that along to Amber, and I don't have that off the top of my head.
It's going to be a really difficult number to separate from
Oh, I know, and I,
the library software circulation. Does that count students? I mean, they take
No,
the books out. Heating system, door lock system.
yeah, so I would say a door lock system is not part of that. The heating system is not part of what I'm after. And I get that there's gonna be, a thumb to the wind estimation on a lot of the costs, but part of the reason I'm asking the question is because there's no ready answer. So I don't think as a district we understand what our classroom technology spend has been doing over the last several years. Or maybe I'm wrong. If I'm wrong,
I would
then you
just
could.
put a stab at it. I think that the classroom computer cost for the computers in the classroom kids sit at has declined.
So the
And I would
dollar
say
amount
that-
year on year is less and less and less.
Well, I wouldn't say less and less and less every year for sure, but I would say that I used to budget $2,500 for each machine, then I budgeted $1,000 for each machine.
But
then
we
I
have more
budgeted-
machines.
I realize that, but the degree to which it's gone down, the fact that I now budget $250
It's a
per
10-to-1
machine
ratio.
is incredible.
And that's what I'm after, because I'm not convinced my perception is correct. That's why I'm looking for some numbers. If somebody can come up with some good hard data to say, look, these are the big numbers that move around.
My proof of that is that until the last, maybe 4 years ago, I was level funded in hardware at $20,000, period. I bought more and more machines for $20,000 because they were cheaper and cheaper, but it was level funded.
Okay.
Which I believe this budget, basically the technology lines are level funded.
Except that it's less than level funded, because it was $38,000 last year, now
So
it's.
for this
So
budget.
we've
do you have a
got
question
little
about where we
anecdotes.
are
So
in
what
this
I'm
budget?
curious is because our subscription cost goes up, our software cost, buying goes down. I just want to know what that's doing. If somebody can get that number, it would be great.
Zach's got something for you.
Just real quickly, because this sounds like it's gonna be a pile of information that isn't necessarily gonna, I don't know what we're rooting out here, but I want this request to be by the committee as we discussed at the beginning of the year. Because before we burn a bunch of resources trying to track down a bunch of information that I don't know the rest of this committee is interested in, I would like this committee to request it, either request it or not request it as a whole, because
I second the motion.
Well, I think you made the motion. We need a second.
that wasn't a motion on my, I'm asking this committee to.
Then I'll put it in the form of a motion.
I'll second that.
Okay.
So the reason I'm asking it goes to a certain degree to our orange highlighted numbers. And as we bring devices and software into the building, as we expand those programs, those become fixed costs. So you have fixed costs. You have to buy the license. For a Chromebook to be of any value, it has to have software. You have to be able to do something on it. And I'm curious what that's doing over time. I think we need to understand that, what that looks like over the course of time, so we can see if we're getting a return on investment, or, because my gut tells me we're spending more, but there's a loud enough voice in the back of my head that says you're probably wrong, and that's why I would just like to see what the numbers are, so we can know what we're doing as a district.
Further discussion on the motion?
I just want to state that this is one of those requests that I think is going to burn a tremendous amount of time and resources, and I don't know that it's going to net a result that, I don't know what value is going to come out of the request. So it's, in my mind, it's throwing good money away.
So just as an update, not on the motion, there were two things that we voted on at the first meeting that I haven't been enforcing because we've been moving along. One was requests being voted on, and the second was a 2-minute limit per speaker. I think we've been doing pretty well on the second one, and we haven't had outrageous requests, I don't believe, but that's where this is coming from, was two things that we had voted on at the beginning of the year. So if there's any further discussion of the motion, all those in favor of, Andrea?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I see both sides of this, and I do agree that this year, most of these budget lines appear to be down. So I think as far as actions that we would take this year, I doubt that we're going to start adding more back in because we have, budget constraints, and the school board has looked at it and said, we think we can live with this. But perhaps the board could, or the budget committee could say, next year, when you prepare information, when you put together the request for the 38, it'd be nice to know what are all the pieces that you think you really need, and then we could see, again, with some 5-year history. So I think, maybe this year we wouldn't do anything about it. So again, it might be a waste of, I don't want to say a waste of time, but an extra effort that doesn't need to be made. But it would be a good piece of information to capture that history going forward, if that's
Agreed.
possible.
Yes, actually, I agree with that as well. All those in favor of the motion signify by...
The way it's stated right now, which is to get the information now.
Yes, so clarification on the motion is the motion is to have the technology director come up with how...
No.
It'd be the SAU
The
staff in
SAU.
that case.
Get you a number on how much of the technology is being used by direct student services, correct? Of the amount of money spent.
I'll tell you what, if the select board member will withdraw the second, I'll withdraw the motion. I made this request at our last meeting, and there was no deep dive discussion, and there was no objection to it. We only have 2 meetings left, and it's fine. If the committee's not interested, then I'll drop it. I don't, if you don't want the information, we don't want it. Do you remove it?
He removed it.
I'll withdraw the motion.
Further discussion on the technology budget, and you were going to check into the summer helpline to make sure that that
Yeah,
was
I mean, I suspect at face value that we're gonna need more, network technician assistance.
Well, not that, the summer help on the.
Correct.
technology.
So what may bring a slight reduction in that line when you extrapolate the hourly rate of the replacement, we're also gonna need more technical help during that summer, so we're gonna be bringing in additional tech time. I'm gonna verify that, but I suspect that's how we're gonna see that play out.
Okay. Further questions for the technology director while she's here? Seeing none, thank you very much for coming in. And before we delve back into the new position, I just wanted a couple things that keep coming up. I just wanted some clarification for you guys on, and I'm not sure what page it's on here, but aides for classroom paraprofessionals. Who is special ed in that line? Who is not? Who's one-on-one, et cetera? Where would we find that?
So if you go into the
On page 9.
rosters.
Oh, no.
No, I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
on the roster.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm seeing something around like 40 and 41.
That'd be
26.
pages 21 through 29 are the roster for the operating budget.
Oh, I was in the, okay.
So, and I'm gonna have Mr. Smith help walk us through this as well, because he is there, but page 26 is where the special ed lines begin. And so the aides and stuff, obviously, is broken out in the description. Again, special ed services are driven by the individual plans per student. So that is, we are not placing aides randomly throughout the building. They are placed based upon needs. That is something that is discussed and developed between the special ed coordinator, the special ed staff, and the parents involved. But there are a few aides inside the building. There are kindergarten aides that are not tied to special ed. So the kindergarten classrooms have aides, as well as the preschool have dedicated aides.
And on those, on the one-to-one aides who are in the classroom for special ed, can you speak to their job? Are they helping educate the entire class, or are they there just for the
The
one?
one-to-one aides are dedicated to a student.
Okay. So do you feel that we can count that as an overall student-to-teacher ratio with a one-to-one aide in there?
My opinion is no, but I would defer special education questions.
Oh, we have the special education coordinator.
Oh, I'm sorry, geez. Yes. Yes.
So do we have any,
I have a question quick. You mentioned 33. Where did that number come from?
It's right here in the budget.
I'm reading 36, I think. I guess
Well, they've
maybe I-
upgraded.
Okay. Is that the page we're talking about? Page 27 has
No.
36?
27 has 36, but some of those are administrative assistants
They're
and
counting
whatnot.
those as the aides, not under the SPED umbrella. They may be counted as the preschool and kindergarten aid.
Well, but this 36.
Yeah, I got the stuff he just handed out to me. Where's
Well, the
the
bus
page there?
monitors are usually a combined effort with the SPED aid.
Well, but does it,
They're not
Rosters, page
separate
26.
usually. The SPED aid may get an additional
The
allotment.
rosters.
the number 36 of physicians is misleading then?
It's 33 for the general SPED aid and one-to-one, and then the kindergarten preschool adds
I don't
the extra.
understand the 36 and the 33 then. You must have more technology, or more experience than I. I guess I have to wait to hear what.
So Karen is the assistant superintendent and, as well as for special education. Am I using the right title?
All student services.
All student services, I'm sorry. So I will allow her to speak and field special education questions.
For the SAU or for the school?
For the
For the
SAU.
SAU.
Okay.
So, I was hearing specific questions about what the aides do. Is that what the questions that I was understanding it to be, or?
That wasn't exactly my line of questioning, but
Okay.
if you want to just, again, do an overview of special ed so we can.
Okay. So as Mr. Langlois said, the students that have IEPs, those decisions are made at that level. There's a binding IEPs, are legal documents, so that if those services are ordered in the IEPs, those have to be fulfilled. In some cases, it's one-to-one, and in that case, it's a one-to-one dedicated aid for a specific purpose. It could be for communication, it could be for behavior, it could be social emotional regulation, it could be for medical issues. Those are dedicated one-to-one, so they're not helping the other students in the class except as an auxiliary piece, but their first responsibility is to that student. One of the things that I have talked about in the past is that for some reason, we haven't been able to figure out why, Deerfield has a very high concentration of students with autism. And typically, students with autism have very significant needs, and those are usually helped with having someone there with the communication, with the regulation, those kinds of things. At this point, I think there's probably, out of your special ed population, I think you have between 18 and 20 students with that diagnosis. And so that immediately raises your number of paraprofessionals required, because frequently those students do have one-to-one aids because their needs are so intense. So with that number, like just right off the top, and not even talking about any of the other students, that could certainly impact your numbers.
I don't know if you have the numbers right there, but could you just give me a split of how much of this budget is special ed and how much is non-special ed of the total school budget, Zach?
Give me a minute, I might be able
Tag
to.
anything with a 1,200 in it.
All the
Get your
1,200
number.
lines, plus,
You've done this a couple of times.
I don't know where it is in here.
So, Mr. Chairman, while we go fishing for that number, because it's a perennial favorite, I'm surprised nobody's thrown the card on the field yet to say that a huge part of that is very student-specific, and it has to do with placement and needs. And so, well, one can identify a very large special ed spend, a very large number. It's beyond, you're going to be shocked to hear this, it's beyond the scope of this committee to deal with it.
I understand we're not going to be able to deal with it, and I just want to have the number out there for the overall budget discussion.
Okay.
It would need to be added.
Yeah,
up. It's
it would
not
have to be
appropriate.
added up.
I am,
For-
You can send it over to.
I'm working.
Zach is working on it.
Anything with 1,200, all you gotta do is add them up.
But okay, but it also includes some other lines that, the special ed transportation is not a 1,200 line. Those have to be pulled out. The
Those are separate.
beginning piece of that, it looks like it's proposed $2,893,151, which,
plus the transportation.
plus the transportation, plus, I'm looking to see some of your assessment, your diagnostic, which is another $61,000.
A very significant portion of the budget.
very
is-
significant.
Ballpark number is a fifth of the budget.
Probably.
Horseshoes and hand grenades.
In
Probably.
transportation, yep.
So, the 1,200 lines plus the special education transportation is $3,134,210. And if I parse through it, there might be a couple of other lines that are dropped.
That is-
from
And
Very sufficient, I would say, to answer that question. I just wanted to say we have a,
Two.
out of the total school budget, we're we're talking about a third, right?
It's very relevant
Quarter.
with that.
Quarter. So relatively a large amount, but as Kevin said, it's what is run by the IEPs. We can't touch it.
We can't touch it. The egg can be cracked, but it has to be done at a completely different level in this committee.
Mr. Chairman?
Andrew?
Okay, a question. You talked about the one-on-one responsibilities. If somebody is just a special ed aide but not listed as one-on-one, where is their role and why are they assigned to a particular class or something?
So typically, those are the ones that, the folks that are shared. So they might be working with a number of students during the day. Some students maybe only needs a paraprofessional in reading or language arts because they have difficulty with writing, or just in math because they have dyscalculia. So that could be the case too. And it could also be the preschool aides. Somebody could be listed as a special ed aide for a preschool class because you have a significant number of students with disabilities in your preschool.
Thank you.
Mr. Dill.
Zach.
That works out to 23.39%. Just to finalize that.
Thank you.
The horseshoe was close.
Within 3.
On the special ed line, on the 26-27, Zach, I know there was some discussion on how many people were in there. It looks like you guys have a couple people listed, their aides and their bus monitors or something like that. Is that the case? So we only have 33 people, but there's 36 positions or something to that effect?
I think the 36 is the total of the lines for positions, if you look at it, and there are a couple of people that are duplicated. that-
Yes, that's what I was getting at.
Mr. Chairman?
Kevin?
So, it's about process. I don't want to speak for Ms. Hopkins, but I'm going to paraphrase what I understand the question to be, because I've heard it from a number of constituents. There's a perception that there's too many people working in the Deerfield Community School. That's the sort of, horseshoe across the field throw, that there's too many people working in that school for the school population. So if that's the premise, if we accept that as the premise, then really the question, is it one-on-one aides? Is it multiple use aides? Is it a special ed department versus extracurriculars or whatever? Then the question becomes, how do we effectively manage the employment roles down? And that's a very interesting question, and that takes a lot of work. We have 2 meetings after tonight. We've got a Tuesday night and we've got a Saturday work session. It's not impossible to make motions in that direction, but to make educated decisions with enough factual backup to be able to do that is a very heavy lift. I am certainly willing to spend the time and the effort if that's the road we want to go down, but it's my understanding that's the reality of the question, that there's a perception there's too many people working in the school, and if there are too many, what positions are there, and how do we extricate them from the budget? That's what it boils down to. So if that's the premise, I will leave it to others to unspool that.
And I'll just note that the extrication of positions from the school will not be from the special education department. So we are taking away, if we reduce staff and we are trying to reduce teachers, we are not reducing special education staff.
It's
We will
not-
be reducing the general education staff.
It's not that the school board decided to have one-on-one.
The school board has absolutely no input on IEPs. None.
That's true.
Can I add 2 pieces of information? One of the things that you should know, that your percentage of students with disabilities total in the school is higher than higher than the state average. You're pretty close to 20 to 22% at any time of students of your total population with disabilities. The other piece, in order to help people with the answers to why we have so many people, one of the things that are required is a checklist and data collection as far as the aides being added or taken away from a student's IEP. So there is a process that's gone through, and it's scrutinized every year. So when you're looking at what you see here, it's based on that process having been vetted. There's a number of checklists that we go through to make sure that that student still requires the aid, and in what areas of the day that that student requires the aid. So it's well documented in that student's file. So it's,
I'm not so concerned about the number of aides. I'm concerned about the roles and responsibilities of those aides while they're in the school. If we have the opportunity to have that many support staff for our children, I believe they should be thriving, and I'm delighted to have them there. When I hear stories of aides on cell phones and aides on their tablets, looking at Facebook and looking through their devices, that's what bothers me the most. It does not bother me that there's 4 adults and 2 teachers in a classroom. If that classroom is thriving and those children's needs are being met, that's what we're looking for at our school.
I totally agree.
That's my problem.
I totally agree with you that that is unacceptable. That's not what they're there for.
But I would not reduce the amount or seek to reduce the amount of sped aid if I knew it was purposeful.
Kev?
So, just so we can understand the numbers, because I'm not shocked at 20% in special ed program. That I used to teach, and that seems to be a fairly standard number. What's the state percentage?
The state is around, it fluctuates between 15 and 17.
Okay, and the 15 and 17, is that IEPs 504s?
No,
or is
that's
that
just IEPs.
Straight IEP
Students with identified.
is 15, 17?
15 to 17% in any given year. It goes up, it goes down a little bit.
And Deerfield currently,
Is the last time I looked, it was around 20 point something, close to 21.
and that's IEPs only.
IEPs only, yes.
Do you happen to know, and if you don't, you don't have to go looking for it, do you happen to know how many children, what percentage of the children have 504 plans?
I do not know the answer to that,
Okay.
but I don't know if Mr. Smith does, but yeah, that's a different group.
For those of us who
We could
are
find that
not
out.
fluent in that, because Phil's giving me the look that I'm thinking right now is, what's a 504 plan?
A 504 plan is also to address disabilities. It's under the Americans with Disabilities Act. So it could be someone who has, a broken leg and temporarily on a 504 plan for accommodations only. They don't require specialized instruction, but they require accommodations.
Was it just you, Phil? I was completely lost on that one, too.
Okay.
Kevin?
Oh, I know what 504 plans
Oh, no,
are.
I thought
I lived under them for several years. Yeah, I mean, those numbers aren't, that percentage is not out of line with,
Actually, if we're at 20% and that makes me feel better about the 23% of the budget, if we're closer to that number, I guess, if we're at 20.1%. Further questions for the special ed SEU coordinator? Andrea?
Yes, just, when we talk about the transportation, I believe Amber said something to the effect that you might be looking into different
Companies.
companies, like getting bids and whatever. And what is the transportation issue? Is it that we actually transport them to the Deerfield school, or is this transportation out of the district? What is
Both.
our mix?
Both. We're required to provide the transportation in order for the student to benefit from their services. So if they are in our district placement, we transport them back and forth to the out-of-district placement. If they are at Deerfield Community School and they can't ride the larger buses, there are smaller buses to make those accommodations possible. We are going out to bid. One of the biggest challenges right now is getting enough transportation. There are not enough bus drivers, and there's not enough buses out there to provide the needs, and that's SAU-wide. We struggle with that. We're right now, we had one company that does our out-of-district piece, and we've had to, they get right of first refusal, of course, but we've had to utilize 4 or 5 different companies in order to meet our needs, and sometimes that doesn't even work. So we are going out to bid.
Thank you.
Further special ed questions? Thank you very much for coming in.
Welcome.
I thought we had somebody in the corner there we hadn't recognized.
I was thinking policing my notes more so than anything else.
So I guess that brings us back to page 51, and what is the big change in this year's budget is the new teacher. So,
So, Mr. Chairman,
Kevin, where I was going with that is I wanted to see if we had a motion, but sorry.
well, I think I want to understand process. So if we follow the premise that the SAU and the school board has set forth, the staffing level for classroom teachers is fixed. So if we're to find potential savings, then we have to look elsewhere. We've chosen not to get more background information on technology to see if that's a driver. It's my understanding that what we've been told is the cost drivers are special ed, salary, and benefits. Those are the cost drivers. So if we're not gonna look at technology, if any of that, and I gotta admit, I'm a little disappointed we didn't get the list that we're asked for of what sort of the, you know, what we need, what we'd like to have, and if money was no issue for classroom supplies, to increase educational opportunity. I'm disappointed we didn't get that. At this point, I'm just gonna let that go as a disappointment. Then that brings us to head count. So I guess my question is, what's the salary and benefits as is? And what does that change to if we pull one teacher out?
I believe in the roster you guys have listed down as a,
Yeah,
as the new
it's the
position.
master
with that
step
all
5,
broken
I
out.
just need to,
I think it's the 48,034 or something
plus
like that.
benefits,
Plus benefits.
Plus
And
benefits.
benefits are probably 35-40%.
Approximately.
So it's probably a $65,000-$70,000.
What page?
It's around, she's right, it's
Oh. Okay.
So if we reduce 70,000 off the bottom line, that changes the growth of this budget by, anybody want to jump at that? Because I know what it is, it's a really small number. Because the cost drivers in our school, one teacher isn't gonna change that. So if you don't take a multi-pronged approach and look at a lot of different things that potentially you can touch, then
I also think it's important to note the school board already took the multi-prong approach and looked at as many things as we could to help reduce the budget right out of the gate.
Yeah, I guess I just wanted to add, I'm confused. I thought we were bringing people in because we were concerned that we didn't have enough money in some of these supplies. So I'm confused by the discussion now that we're saying we were gonna try to save money there, which we already agreed that we thought was slashed, and we were putting money back into it, and now we're talking about needing to find money elsewhere. I'm confused.
so I can address that. So it's about priorities. It's about where money goes. So for me, if I can intellectually justify the spend, I'm all behind it. So $100,000 into paving, I've been asking for that for a couple of years, got it in this year. I'm very, very happy to put $100,000 on the bottom line because I think it's money well spent. If somebody wants to step to the microphone and say, I'd like to add $10,000 so that we could buy more textbooks, so kids could bring textbooks home with them at night to do their homework instead of just the worksheet sheet, so they had a reference, so parents could work with them. Because currently, it's my understanding, we don't do that because textbooks don't always come back, and if they don't come back, we don't have enough, so we're shoestring. It's anecdotal, I get it, Ms. Hopkins.
They're
but that's-
online.
But that's what
They're
I.
online.
Okay, guys.
But that's what I hear. So if somebody says 10,000 for textbooks would allow this, I can go to the mat for 10,000 for textbooks. I can do that. That's the difference.
You want to follow up now? Okay. I just feel like we're dancing around an issue. And we're going to continue to dance around it. I would like an up or down vote. I'm in support of the new teacher. I think it's been justified in my mind. And it's been justified for to the school board for them to put it to us. Is there anything else in the school budget that we want to address while we have school people here and school board members? Andrea?
My thing that I harp on here is the health insurance line and the FICA line. And I did ask Amber last time to confirm that the FICA is being calculated correctly. I don't know if there's a section 125. I don't know, perhaps somebody that knows how the compensation works at the school. When people take out their health insurance, do you reduce their FICA? When you get your
That would be-
paycheck,
that
do
would
you
be
have
the
a
Amber
difference
question.
between your W-2, in other words, if your salary is 85,000, does your W-2 show only 79,000 because you took money out and put it aside for health insurance? Do you do it on a pre-tax basis?
I think that would be a Zach to an Amber question.
Right.
Not,
I hear your question.
Yeah.
I probably ought to know, especially by the, I'm creating something that I'm failing in my own life in some fashion. Like, I'm too
Well-
busy working, I don't even know it's.
so that's probably a business manager question.
Right, but there is a big issue about that because so many people opted into the health insurance this year, is why we're having this higher health insurance. Well, then the FICA should go down if in fact they're doing it on a pre-tax basis, which I can't imagine that there's an employer that doesn't offer that. And so again, it's just a point of, there's some big increases there that are in the budget that maybe won't actually be spent. So why do we budget more than we need to budget?
So, Mr. Chairman, it's my understanding that the SAU Business Administrator will be with us during our next scheduled meeting, right after New Year's. And so I would assume that she would have those answers at that time.
Well,
And I don't think we're
except-
going to move the bottom line of this budget tonight anyway.
Except,
The
The
staff
SAU
is
is-
off for the next 10 days, basically.
basically until that
So we have a
meeting.
Saturday work session, the Saturday after that, right? So our Saturday work session is for the 6th of January. What day do they come back?
They come back on the 2nd.
So they'll have 3 working days to pull together whatever questions.
From 5 different towns.
Either way, that would
If
be
we'd
the,
have started early,
that
we
would be
wouldn't
the-
be running so late.
that would be where we're gonna see that. We're not, I'm just saying,
Right.
we're not gonna see that answer at the next Tuesday's meeting, because like we were told, they're on vacation.
Right.
Andy?
I would bet that Amber can tell you whether you have a section 125 or not without any research whatsoever, and can probably give you a pretty up-to-date answer
Right off the
about
top
how
of her
she
head, I
conducts,
would
right
think.
off the top of her head as
Right.
the administrator for this.
Further questions on, or discussion on the budget? Seeing none, we can, oh, sorry.
I don't know where this number is, but in the past, there's been like a tuition revenue. I don't even know where that is. Do we charge preschool tuition or something?
Yes.
Oh, okay, so that is what that is. When there's like a 22,000 or something tuition revenue, it's the preschool kids that are coming in for age 3 and 4 that are paying tuition dollars.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, actually, I have a
Not all
question.
of them, though. It's a developmental preschool, so there's a proportion of them that
Right,
are-
I thought that
there
was,
is a
right, I
portion
thought
do.
that was the
On
case.
the Pace Academy that we're, the 3471, it's on the last page, on page 12. I think I read on the stuff you guys handed out, there was a blurb on Pace too. Are we sending anybody there?
We typically send 1 student to the Pace Academy. The Pace Academy is a public charter school that is sponsored by the Pembroke School District.
Yeah,
And
I got
so-
that explanation last time.
Right, so, and it is open to all students, Deerfield. The 4 schools in the AREA agreement have priority for placement inside the charter school. Deerfield sits at a second position, and then other districts would fill in behind that. But we typically have 1 or 2 students that attend Pace.
For $3,400?
For,
That's minus the adequacy.
yes,
It's the additional.
Okay.
Right.
That's
The adequacy aid stays with the school.
So that's the
supplement
additional
costs.
right.
Pace, because I'm just trying to run it off the high school tuition budget on the front there, and
Yeah, with the adequacy, it's 80%.
80% of the cost of people.
Okay, yeah. For Pembroke, the Pembroke,
So that's your balance of what you pay after,
the adequacy, yeah.
after you collect the adequacy.
okay. Okay. I feel like we just learned something here, thank you.
You're welcome.
I had no idea how that worked. All right, further questions on the school board? with the school budget?
Well, the only thing I'll comment is in watching school board meetings, the budget was prepared by the SAU staff, brought to the school board. The school board had sticker shock on the bottom line. Instructed the SAU staff to go back and make appropriate cuts where possible to get a smaller bottom line. And then those cuts were generally reviewed by the school board and either allowed to remain a cut or some monies were added back in.
Okay. Questions on the school budget? Because I think we have a very quick town budget update coming next. All right, I guess we'll swap over to the town budget stuff. What you got, Andy?
Sure, I can give you
Thanks for coming in, everybody.
a town budget update. The latest copy of the budget that you have essentially reflects the changes that the Budget Committee has made to date. You'll notice that the Selectmen's line does not match the Budget Committee line. The Board of Selectmen is in agreement with most of the changes. However, I think primarily based on the opinion of the road agent, the board is not supporting the $100,000 addition, which really, the Selectmen's column is here just so you can anticipate where the board might be going, at the deliberative session. The budget number is the Budget Committee's budget, so your line is there, our line is there for reference, and it gives the Budget Committee some heads up as to what the Board of Selectmen is likely to be lobbying for at deliberative session.
So can we ask, for those of us who weren't at the Board of Selectmen meeting, why not?
Primarily because the road agent does not see a need for it, and probably more importantly to the Selectmen, does not have a plan for it. And I think, I can't speak for all the board members, but I think the general feeling was that if the road agent does not have a strategy and plan to use this $100,000, we don't want to incorporate it into the budget.
Kevin?
Mr. Chairman, so this, now it's starting to sound more like last year. I was surprised at the eager support during our last meeting from our good friend from the Select Board. And so this was the argument that was made, and in fact, why the $100,000 did not make it into last year's budget. But lo and behold, we find, what are the monies? The impact.
$124,000.
That we find impact fee money that is going to revert back to builders if we don't use it. And we went from having no plan, no need, no desire to spend $100,000 on roads at Budget Committee meeting to putting $125,000 into roads. Again, one of the most frequent things I hear from constituents is a perception that we have a degrading quality of roads in Deerfield. And we've had testimony over the years that the more we let roads go, the more money they cost to fix. And so I'm afraid that we are deferring maintenance that's going to make it more expensive for us in the long run. That's why I advocated for the $100,000. It's my intention to show up at deliberative and advocate for it. I will also remind members of the Budget Committee that there was an alternate perception of why an elected highway agent may choose not to increase a yearly budget by $100,000. I didn't articulate that case. That came from the Select Board member, but I would encourage you to review that meeting, because if that is the motivation for not putting in the $100,000, I don't think we're doing our community a service.
I don't see a motion coming to pull it.
Yeah, I would just comment that this Select Board and Budget Committee member thinks that adding the $100,000 is a good idea. And as Mr. Harrington, the town administrator, is my witness, I presented as best I could Mr. Verville's argument and said that I thought there was a certain logic to it. And it's not well received.
Now, a question I would have is, the budget's not $100,000 off.
No,
The bottom line number's not $100,000 off.
Yeah, we have made some adjustments. Adjustments that we made include wage scale increase for the highway department, which is 3 members. We also, and I don't know if the COLA is included in this number, John? Yeah, we also discussed a 1.5 increase cost of living adjustment, which is reflected in this. There were a couple of other, we did agree with adding, or we did agree with removing $869 from the GBW, I believe. Or there were 3 changes that you had recommended: GBW, Parks and Rec, Cemetery, and Highway. As I said, the board did not support the Highway 100,000. I believe we did support the 2,401 for the cemetery. I also believe we added the 1,079 back in for Parks and Rec.
That's correct.
And I believe we also added the 869 for the GBW back in.
That's correct.
And if the town administrator has any more insight, as he's the one that ran the bottom line today for us, I would certainly defer to him.
There's the 1.5% increase for the full-time, part-time staff that the board decided.
Yeah, and if I could also just jump in and add a detail to that, there's a number of exclusions to that 1.5 COLA. We're anticipating a new town clerk. We're not going to apply the 1.5 to the existing town clerk's wage. We also excluded the police department from the COLA because we did a wage adjustment. We also excluded the highway department from the COLA because we did a wage adjustment, and I believe there were 1 or 2 other positions that we excluded from that COLA. We made a very specific list of cost of living adjustment and applied it only to positions that hadn't had wage adjustments recently.
I would guess the new rec director would probably be
And
exclusion.
the new Parks and Rec director was also excluded from that, as was the assistant
Okay.
Parks and Rec director.
Mr. Chairman?
Andrea?
You know, we keep getting a new package each time that this comes, and I've listed a whole bunch of pages where there's places where, like page 15, and 15, we never have any minutes that actually say we voted on this. I do believe we did, but we don't have minutes that say that. But now, the new piece of paper says that we agreed to the same figure that they have, but the number that we voted on, if we voted, was 95,000, and this is now 116. In other words, there's changes happening to the budget, and they're saying that because we voted on accepting whatever the bottom line was to begin with, they're saying our number is the same. And page 26, we never voted on insurance, and insurance has changed significantly. You know, one number is down by 30,000, another one's up by,
Well, insurance
20.
we tabled till they got new bids.
well, right, and what I'm saying is, we haven't voted, and they're saying, you know, that, I don't know, they show that we have an NBC vote, or an NBC figure that's the same, so I guess they're just saying, we need to vote on that. Page 37, something went down from the 12.9 figures, from 96.50 down to 81.20, but again, it's like,
You're
our
going to see
number.
it throughout the budget.
What?
You're going to see that throughout the budget in a number of places.
And I do have a note here about, they were going to come in with a decision about the highway. Page 64, we never voted or heard about the testing. Somebody was going to get back to us on that. We tabled it. And there's a budget line on page 65 that we raised the welfare director back to the 522, which gave it 69,777, and the budget shows 69,667 on page 65. So, you know, it's almost like you have to go back and say, almost for every item, you know, are we going to vote again? Because, or, you know, it's a lot of work to go back and look at all these numbers and say, okay, 2 weeks ago we voted on this and it was this number, but now it's not this number in here, so how could we ever vote on the bottom line until we know that all the numbers that we voted on are the numbers we voted on?
Andy?
Yeah, and I would just respond to that, that your comment that how are we going to vote on the bottom line is exactly how you're going to need to vote. And that's the Budget Committee's perspective on this budget. It's a bottom line budget. We will get you an accurate and finalized budget by the time we go to, I would assume, work session. It won't change from then unless the Budget Committee changes it. But you will essentially be voting on a bottom line on this, and
Okay.
Yeah, the insurance line, what page is that again?
And then it may all change again when we get
26.
to the deliberative session. Two of the things you mentioned, the insurance line, we do have finalized insurance figures now. We also, the testing you mentioned, the Board of Selectmen wanted to go out to bid on that. We'd had the same vendor for more than 10 years. We weren't sure whether that was a competitive number or not. We found out that it was a very competitive number, and we couldn't come close with a bid. But these will be finalized, and unfortunately, it's a working budget. This is by no means a final representation of the budget, and the Budget Committee has the final say on their number that's recommended.
Mr. Chairman?
Hold on one second. On the insurance line, can you just give us an update on that, John? Because that was one that, on page 26, that was something I know you said you were going to go out to bid. What did we change and what the updates are on that?
That budget is accurate
Okay.
as of today.
I can give you a rough idea.
Yeah,
of
just
we did
what
there.
changed on here and what?
Yeah, we switched plans. We found a more competitive plan than the plan we were presently with. I think initially we were looking at taking $25,000 out of the health insurance plan. My recollection is that we didn't take quite that much out because we have a health reimbursement account for the hospital deductible on the plan. We typically go with a very high hospital deductible and reimburse the employees to an extent in the event they need it. It's worked out very well for the town. We've never hit the number, and by doing some simple mathematical calculation, unless we have every employee in the building have to put their family in the hospital, we're going to continue to make out. So, but we did adjust that number a little bit because the new plan has a higher hospital deductible, and I believe we added $5,000 back into the line for employee reimbursement.
Kevin?
So, thank the member for the keen eye. So it's always been my understanding, I have 2 points. It's always been my understanding that once the MBC votes a particular budget, page X, Y, and Z, that those numbers are then fixed for the MBC. So those numbers should not be changing. Whatever number we vote, that is the number that is there. So that's the the MBC column should be the numbers as we voted it. The voters get to see this budget at deliberative as the MBC proposed budget, and those numbers should be the numbers that we voted. And if there are discrepancies, those should be corrected. The selectmen can do whatever they want with their column, right? That's their proprietary column. So the MBC number should be put back to whatever it is we voted. That should be double checked. The other thing is a little bit unusual in that it's my understanding, and I believe past practice has been that when the selectmen have made changes to particular lines of their column of the budget, that they came to the committee and made a motion to basically update the MBC budget to the new select board numbers. So if COLAs have been added in to the various budget lines, I was under the impression that those motions would be made, discussed, and voted on by the MBC as to whether or not we concur with those numbers. And it's through that debate process that when we go to deliberative and there are questions, that as budget committee members, we're able to speak intelligently to them. If we don't have them as a motion, if we don't discuss them, and somebody says, well, what do you know about the COLA? My answer is, I know absolutely nothing about it. It's not in my budget line. It was never brought to the table. And that seems atypical from the way we've operated in the past.
I would say that just on.
Yeah, and
Kevin's-
I believe we can correct that and certainly make sure that we've got the numbers that were actually voted on in your column.
Well, that and what I was going to say is just if we can get a list of what budget lines changed, especially on the COLA stuff, because I agree with Kevin, we didn't vote on that.
The budget you see in front of you does not reflect any changes to the MBC line for the COLAs or any of the action that the board took. Those numbers are original. The only numbers in the column for the selectmen changed, but I can get you the list and the page numbers of what lines were changed.
Well, and I would assume that you guys would want us to vote to agree with you.
Yeah.
So we'd have to have some sort of thing to vote to agree with you on, and an argument to agree with you, before we can just vote on it, so. And I agree with Kevin on that. Usually we get just a list of, so Andrew's not here flipping painfully to figure out what we're on. But Andrew?
Mr. Chairman, I would like to address that because the COLA one, I think is going to be easy for them to go back and say, okay, you know, we took this line and we did this, you know, do you agree with it? But if I go to page 15, the day we discussed it, our line said 95,240. It was on December 4th or 5th or whatever. And now our line says 116,973.94. You know, it's like, what, 16, 20-some $1,000 higher. And once again, my broken record, the FICA number, it just does not make sense. Last year's FICA number, 2017 actual, the one that needed to be fixed, has a whole bunch of FICA in it that was part of that problem, I believe. And now, you know, this number is going up to 93,000. I don't understand why it's going up that much. And here's a peculiarity I was not aware of, but when you look at fire and rescue, you know, those are the places where we're adding the main positions. Fire and police people are not subject to FICA, according to what I read in New Hampshire law. They have this, like, instead, out of their retirement program, the 31 or something %, they do not participate in FICA. So if that's the salary that went up, the FICA shouldn't be going up because of that. So why would FICA have gone up like, you know, 25,000?
I assume John's writing that down because he's gonna check on it.
Right. So again, I spent a lot of time going from 12.4 to 12.9 to 12, and then I get a new one tonight, and I see that the numbers that we supposedly, you know, somebody made a motion, 95,240, and we all, you know, voted unanimously, or we didn't. And I, you know, will now have to take the new thing that we got tonight and go line by line as well.
All over
And I don't see why I should have to do that.
Nope, I would agree with you, and I think that's something we can correct.
Thank you.
Thought you guys were gonna be the quick ones today. The easy ones. So on that line, I was gonna discuss under new business, but we keep jumping around to it anyway, just so we're all in agreement. Tuesday the 2nd at 6:30, does that still work for everybody?
Yep.
Yep.
Okay. And who are we going to ask, are we asking anybody to come in for that?
Mr. Chairman?
Kevin?
So, a third of the elected board is not here tonight. And so, I would assume we would want school representation here. Well, no, they're on vacation, so,
Coming back that day.
yeah. So I suppose it begs the question, is there value in having that meeting? I mean, well, we could do the town budget.
We could,
We'll have the
you guys will have the
numbers that
update.
you want.
I just, if we can't, do we need somebody here from the SAU to come in and answer questions on that meeting? And then if they can't come in that day, is there benefit to having that meeting on that Tuesday? We could possibly move it to that Thursday.
Run into scheduling, possible scheduling conflicts.
I know that we've had conflicts with the SAU on scheduling with other towns.
And we also have budget committee members who have said Thursdays are just bad.
Well, that same budget committee member had a problem on Tuesdays, too, previously.
So,
I also, just as a personal opinion, I understand that some of the committee members may not be able to make it to all the meetings, but to spend another 4 hours rehashing what we've already gone through because a member was able to make it to a meeting is a little redundant.
I agree. I just
Well-
wanted to check on the people that were here, if the 2nd is going to work for everybody.
so, Mr. Chairman,
Kevin?
you know, we basically have less than a work week left because according to this, our public hearing is set for Tuesday, January 9th.
Well, that's the next discussion, because we have to give that, how much public notice? 2 weeks? Well, I believe we're 15 days, there's a public notice involved in
There is.
in that one. That's what I'm saying. We can move that one around a little bit, but not a whole
Well,
lot.
you have to be very careful, because if you go pushing it out and you bump into inclement weather, then
Then you don't have much time.
you violate the deadlines that you have to operate by.
Because we're shooting for a work session the 6th.
I would mention, just.
Which would be our
Yeah.
final.
Point of information, I believe the cutoff date for warrant articles is January 9th, too. So we're not going to have a complete warrant for a public hearing likely. The cutoff time is what, 5 o'clock? So depending on when you're having your public
hearing.
session, we could still be contemplating warrant articles at that point, depending on what comes in.
That actually brings up a good question. When do we expect to receive warrant articles from both municipal and school side?
School started discussing their warrant articles last night. More discussion will be forthcoming, but before they're due.
We have draft warrant articles on the town side now, what the selectmen are planning on proposing, but we, as I said, we have until the 9th to accept petition warrant articles.
So, Mr. Chairman,
Yes, go.
so based on that, this committee has to vote on dollar spend warrant articles.
Which-
And so if they come in at the 9th, then we need to pick an alternate date for the hearing so that we can have, because we need to have a meeting to hold those votes on warrant articles before the public hearing. The public hearing, they need to know what our position is on warrant articles so that they can either concur or raise holy hell. So I would look for the chair to suggest an alternate date for both public hearing and then an additional meeting date.
That's why we're working on it. What's our end date on this, Andy, again?
I don't have the calendar in front of me. Do you have the municipal calendar, John? As
If-
well?
I thought I had a copy of the DRA's breakdown. If you can just give me a moment, I'm trying to locate it.
Yeah. So it's still one hit at a time here. We got the Tuesday, we got a possible Saturday work session. There's no way we're gonna have that public hearing on the 9th. That's just not gonna happen. I think we could have a regular work meeting on the 9th. I mean, if they're coming in at 5, we should have copies of them we can look at, vote on, correct?
Well, typically, we send even petition warrant articles, we run by legal counsel to make
Okay.
sure they're actually valid and.
So we got a couple days for that to come
Appropriate.
back. So we got
Yeah.
at least till I'd say the 11th if we do another Thursday, because as much as I like this group, Fridays are probably kind of out for everybody.
I'm reading this thing about preparation of budgets from section 32.5. It says, "The governing body shall hold at least one public hearing on each budget no later than 25 days before each annual or special meeting." So if the two meetings, which I saw on the calendar, now I don't know if they have to stay on these dates, but they were
do.
February 3rd and 10th.
Oh, they do.
If you work backwards 25 days, I don't know that we have 25 days looking at January 9th. The 9th, that's 1, 2, 3,
No, we don't.
4. No, there's not,
It's not 25 days.
well, it's exactly, like, the 9th would be exactly 25 days before Saturday the 3rd.
And we can simply move forward with what typically we would see petition warrant articles prior to the drop dead date, so we can move forward with whatever we have.
Wait a minute, I'm sorry, I'm confused. So.
February 3rd 's
Can you
way
give me
too-
that again?
Well, I think, I wrote these in my calendar, and I
Yeah. But
don't
no,
know if
what's
they're
the-
correct, but
What's the lag from the town meeting?
it says here that the governing body or budget committee shall hold at least one public hearing not later than 25 days before each annual or special
So
meeting,
that gives us all of January.
public notice of which shall be given at least 7 days in advance.
So that gives us, because the meetings are early in March, and there's 28 days in February, that gives us all
Or
of
the
January.
meetings.
What do you have down for February 3rd?
These are deliberative sessions, no? Is the
Deliberative-
annual meeting?
Oh, yeah, deliberative
I-
is,
The
Deliberative
public hearing is the deliberative session, the budget committee's public hearing is different than the deliberative
Yeah,
session.
we don't have to be 25 days ahead of deliberative session. We have to be 25 days ahead of
okay,
The
School and town.
election.
okay, and the election is March 13th. So, working back from that.
When are the deliberatives? Are they March 3rd and 10th? That
No,
can't be
I
right.
have February 3rd and
February
10th.
3rd and 10th.
Vote on the 13th,
Vote on the 13th of March, again,
February 10th and 3rd?
and the 3rd. So we have, if it's not 25 days in advance of that, which is what I was
No,
looking at this as, we
that
have
opens it up.
all of January, I guess.
When do we usually get the petition warrant articles back? Would 2 days be sufficient?
Well,
From,
The 9th.
if they're coming in the 9th, would you guys have them to legal and back by the 11th? Or are we looking a week later?
Depends on what the schedule of the lawyer is. I can't answer that
It
question.
also
Chairman.
depends on the warrant article.
Okay, yeah. Kevin?
but
We can't have public hearing before we vote on them, is what I'm getting at.
no, I get that, but there's no legal requirement to run a citizen petition warrant article past legal. We could vote on what we, because it's a dollar spent. It has to be a petition warrant article with a dollar spent for us to weigh in. We could weigh in on what we think the merits are, and then if the outside occurrence of some legal kerfluffle,
Yeah, Mr. Bearville is absolutely right, and it's done more or less just to make the session, the deliberative session time better spent. If we know for a fact that passage of the warrant article isn't going to have any binding effect, we like to be able to tell the gathering that.
All right, so what I would propose then is we meet on Thursday, the 11th. That gives time for meeting for petition warrant articles to come in. We'll
Mr.
vote on
Chairman?
them, and then we'll have the public session the 16th. Kevin? Which is the following Tuesday.
no, I understand, the 11th of January is a Thursday,
Yeah.
right? But there's also a large public forum being hosted in Deerfield that night at 7 PM.
Was that school choice one?
It is. And I believe they're going to use this space.
Yeah, I think you're right, actually. Good call. Any other suggestions on dates? Okay, thank you
So
for
are
that.
we
That was-
undoing the 2nd because we?
Well, no, I'm working on the 9th right now. I was skipping ahead from the 2nd to the 9th, just on that public hearing we had the 9th.
Oh, the public
Just because we
hearing
know that,
date.
we know the 9th won't work, and we have to vote on them ahead of time. Well, in that case, and good catch on that, Kevin, let's
We
do the
Tuesday,
16th.
16th?
Yeah, let's do Tuesday, the 16th, and then we could do a public hearing the 18th.
So is Tuesday, the 16th, our next meeting?
No.
No.
Still meeting on the 2nd.
Well, that was my next point. Sorry to bounce around on you so much, Zach, but
Just trying to put it in
I
my
know. I apologize on that.
technological control. here.
I scribbled mine out a couple times. where I was-
Stop scribbling, Phil. My brain's not working too fast here.
Mr. Chairman?
So let's do the 2nd then, Kevin?
So it would be nice to meet the 2nd and maybe get very close to finishing the town budget and then button it up on the 6th, right? The bottom line, vote a bottom line on the 6th. Procedurally, that seems possible. A meeting on the 6th would finish the school budget, but allow for a little bit of digestion time to the 16th before we do the bottom line, so the 16th, because typically we get done with the budget and we save the bottom line for the next meeting, just in case something else crosses somebody's mind. So the 16th would be a good date to do the bottom lines, and that would have us in good position for the hearing on the 18th. It would also allow us to do the warrant articles on the 16th, which usually go quick.
So I'm in agreement with Kevin on that, if that works for everybody else. Just the only bone of contention would be on the 2nd. Pretty much, we're just working on town. There's not gonna be anybody here from the school. I don't see us working on the school. So it's gonna be a quick meeting if we have the meeting, so.
It's fine with me, and I will say that there are no big surprises in the town warrant
All right,
articles.
so
the 2nd, the
stop
6th.
scribbling. Let's do a quick meeting on the 2nd. We'll have,
Mostly town,
what's that?
the town.
We're doing the town on the 2nd. Then we're going to have our Saturday meeting on the 6th here.
What time do you intend to start that, Mr. Chair?
The Saturday meeting will start at 9. The meeting on the 2nd will start at the usual time at 6:30.
Saturday the 6th.
Saturday, the 6th at 9 here. And I Then we can have some school people there. And then we'll do the public hearing, sorry, not the public hearing, we'll do our meeting the 16th. And then we will have the public hearing on the 18th.
Mr. Chairman,
Kevin?
does that allow the town and the school side to have everything prepared from the 16th to the 18th for a public hearing?
I believe so, on the town side.
School?
I think so.
So we should try to confirm that. The town seems confident, we got the town administrator, so I feel good about that. We should make sure that we get confirmation on the 6th from the school
Yes.
that they're comfortable with that.
Yes, we should. Okay,
The 16th at 6:30,
Yeah.
yes.
and
And the 18th will be at 6:30 as well here. Unless we're going to make any changes, that was my new business on that one. So,
Well, public hearings, we usually do at 7 PM, just in case you've got long commuters. We
okay.
don't have to, but historically, we've always done them at 7
Well,
PM.
we might have citizens' comments for, half an hour and push it
And
back
to be
seven.
fair, that is what it says on the schedule. It
On the
says
draft
they'll
schedule?
start-
Okay.
Right, it just
We
says
could,
public
we could
hearing,
change
so-
that to 7. Okay, if everybody's thoroughly set on that,
the 18th is at 7.
yes.
You're running out of paper there.
And where are we doing that? We used to do it at the historic town hall. I want to say we've moved it. Did we move
We had it here
recently?
last year.
We've had it here because we didn't have large numbers.
I would suggest we have it here as well. I mean, it's just to open up the
We can publicize it, too.
Yeah,
town hall is.
yeah. It fit just fine in here last year. All right, I didn't scribble the whole time, so now I have to take a second to just put it into my phone. Okay, so I was skipping ahead to new business. Do we have any old business? Do we have any other new business besides those meeting dates? Oh, sorry,
Just
Ben, what do you
wa-
got?
I just wanted to point out, having done the meetings the last two, or the notes for the last 2 times, we do have a member that has had 2 unexcused absences. I don't,
Consecutive?
Yes.
and potentially a third. I think John took the notes before that, so just maybe if we can reach out to him, or I don't know
Yep.
who has his contact info, but
Yes, I noticed that as well. That Mr. Capone hasn't, or David hasn't been here in a while. Any other new or old business? Okay. Citizens' comments? We've
Make a
lost
motion to adjourn.
all our-
Second.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
They don't want to.
Nobody opposes that.
But I don't have to go. But I don't want to.
Thank you. Yeah, he missed,
Yeah.
this is his
I'd really
third.
rather us go tomorrow.
that's what I thought.
Just be done. We only have half day anyway, but I'd really rather just.
It makes it better for me, because that just means I can peel out of town at like 6 o'clock in the morning.
pleasure. Merry
Still have half day.
I can't believe they didn't want your paving money.
No, it's always, this time of year, it's crazy. I've got to
Phil even seconded that motion.
accomplish between now and the end of the year.
That's good news, right?
Are you gonna check with
It pays the bills all winter long. The next week, I pay everything between now
I
and
had
May.
already had,
It's a
I
pain.
already had that